We did have, as most of you may know or may not know, the last day of elections at the county annex was a little bit exciting, all the way around out in the parking lot. From all the way down to actually the sheriff and Chief Dennison was sent video of some events that took place there. That's how crazy some of it was. To my knowledge, I don't know that there was any charges filed against anybody. Sheriff shaking his head no, that did not happen. But it was a little busy out in the parking lot with electioneering and, you know, the entire parking lot full of people electioneering and trying to get into the elections, and also getting into the annex for county business. It was quite an interesting day. I was there most of the day. I got there at 6. I think I got there at 6:30 that morning, and I was still there at, I don't know, 10 or whatever it was late that evening, to see how that all went. And I have been contacted. My office, county judge's office, has been contacted by 2 attorneys' offices about what happened there that day. I don't think we did anything wrong. I don't think anybody that was there, other than whatever the sheriff might have knowledge of, you know, I don't think I didn't see anybody breaking or violating any of the county policies, because we didn't have a policy for some of the things we're going to talk about. So I can't say that there was any foul on anybody from that standpoint. I didn't personally observe it anyway. So, but had one attorney's office has contacted us for public information as far as videos for the whole day, to see if anything happened out in the parking lot that would be a problem. And then I'd had an attorney contact me about the possibility of the elections code, chapter 61, and how the commissioners could adopt reasonable regulations for electioneering on county property. And so we have drafted up a draft of what that might look like, an order that is electioneering regulations. We do have in the Texas Election Code 61.003A-1, and I'm reading from a document that was put out by the Secretary of State. And in that elections code, it says that an entity that owns or controls a public building being used as a polling place may not prohibit electioneering outside the 100-foot distance marker. So I just want to be real clear that within 100 feet of the front door, which Laura always posts those signs out there, so that's very clear where the 100 feet is. There's no electioneering can take place within that, and that's state statute. We don't have to really, you know, make that part of our, it'll be in our policy, but that's just to reflect that we're recognizing the state law on that within that 100 foot. But outside the 100 foot, which is what I just read here, an entity that owns or controls a public building being used as a polling place may not prohibit electioneering outside of the 100-foot distance marker. So we cannot prohibit electioneering outside the 100-foot marker. So if you're familiar with the parking lot at the annex on the west side, those first parking places, not the handicap, but the first places, they are outside of the 100-foot marker, because the 100-foot marker falls in that grass line right there. So anything outside of that, we can't prohibit it, but it goes on to say immediately after that, however, the entity may enact reasonable regulations in regard to the time, place, and manner of electioneering. So that's what this is about, is us following the elections code here with the We can't prohibit electioneering outside the 100-foot marker, but we certainly can, according to this statute, enact reasonable regulations in regard to time, place, and manner of electioneering. So those are that's kind of the basis of what we're doing here. Ms. Stephanie, do you remember seeing in that, there was, let me look here. I'd like to read this too before we go to discussing it, because it's, and this is put out by the Secretary of State. Election Advisory number 2024-06, and it does state regulating electioneering outside the 100-foot marker. And it says an entity that owns or controls a public building being used as a public place may not prohibit electioneering outside of the 100-foot district marker. However, the entity may enact reasonable regulations in regard to the time, place, and manner of electioneering. Texas Election Code 61.003A-1. And then underneath that it says, only a court of law can determine what is reasonable in terms of time, place, and manner. However, an example of a reasonable regulation may include prohibiting electioneering on sidewalks or driveways to keep them clear for pedestrians and traffic. That's in the advisory from the Secretary of State. And I believe that for the most part, that's what what we have drafted up will address, is how electioneering is done in regard to driveways, sidewalks, that's what we're talking about. Anyway, so I just wanted to cover those for the public and for those that are here in Commissioner's Court today, that what we are relying upon in our own reasonable ordinances is the statute in the election code and also recommendation by the Secretary of State. I do have a draft order. Commissioners, do you want me to read through that and point out the highlights? Not that we're taking action on it today because it's in a draft order, but we could see what that kind of looks like moving forward. If you have any questions or comments, this draft of the order for electioneering regulations, purpose and scope. The County of Palapena County has authority pursuant to section 61.03 and section 85.036 of the Texas Election Code to enact reasonable regulations concerning time, place, and manner of electioneering within county lines, county limits, and the county now desires to adopt and establish certain rules and regulations that will govern the time, place, and manner of electioneering within county property and county controlled property. The county finds that the adoption of this policy is in the best interest of the citizens and serves a public purpose and protects the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Palapena County. B, the electioneering regulations apply only to county property and county controlled property used as a polling location during a voting period. So this is an important part. This is not a county-wide ordinance. This does not affect anything except what the county property we have control of. And this particular one, the electioneering regulations, would only apply during voting. That's the only time that this is enacted. Would be during voting. The county properties used as polling locations are identified in Exhibit A to these regulations. C, it is the purpose of these regulations, number one, to provide reasonable regulations for electioneering on county-owned or controlled property when such property is used as a polling place location during the voting period. Two, to establish the electioneering free zone within 100 feet of any outside door through which the voter may enter a county building containing a polling place during any voting period against persons electioneering for or against any candidate, measure, or political party. That's state law. Item number 3, to prevent damage to public property and to assure that a polling place location is sufficiently available during a voting period for those who use the facility other than for election purposes, to protect the public health and safety and welfare of the county. Number 5, to protect the voter and the integrity of the election process. These regulations shall not be construed in violation of any county policy, state or federal statute, or other applicable law. In other words, any word, phrase, paragraph, or section of these regulations is serviceable and should any part of this, any part be declared unconstitutional, illegal, or invalid by any court of competent jurisdiction, such declaration shall not affect any remaining word, phrase, paragraph, or section. That sounds like something an attorney wrote.
And you got to read it.
Number 2, regulations. These regulations apply to electioneering at a polling place during voting period and do not regulate political signs placed on property owned or controlled by other entities or individuals. This policy it's just for county property, not for anyone else. B, no one may post political signs or literature on county-owned property or controlled property that is being used as a polling place at any time other than during the voting period of a particular election as defined by section 61.003 of the Texas Election Code, and for 30 minutes before and after the voting ends. So 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after. That's the time limit that will be set for that. Item number C, no one may post political signs using posts that may damage subterranean water or electrical lines. For purpose of these regulations, the term post shall include, but not be limited to, wooden stakes, rebar, PVC posts, metal posts, and/or metal T-posts, typically used for farm and ranch type fencing. Heavy gauged wire that is generally used for political yard signs is allowed. I'd just like to stop right there and ask the commissioners, we prohibit attaching or fixing in some of our other ordinances, but we have this in here that basically the small yard signs could be used. I just asked the question, are we okay with that? I mean, we can do it. It's not that we can't.
But we don't do it for our other one.
But we don't do them for, yeah, that was my question. I mean, you can make notes of what you wanna scratch or what you wanna add. I mean, we can draft that some other way, you know. I just wanna, that's where some of this comes in. Do we change our temporary sign ordinance to, now we don't have, just to be clear with the commissioners, my opinion, our temporary sign ordinances for just everyday stuff is one thing. This is specifically for electioneering during, yeah, Kessler, you got a question about that?
Well, I'm just gonna say they need to match, so if your temporary sign ordinance, then we need to say, except for
right, electioneering type, yes,
pursuant to
correct.
our order, whatever.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, while you're on that topic, Counselor, just hypothetically here, if our temporary sign ordinances prohibits attaching or fixing temporary signage to county property, so that's just straight up. But we put a clause in there referring to our electioneering ordinance that does allow that. You think that's appropriate? I mean, if that's the way the Commissioner Court wants to go?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. B, no one may post political signs larger than 36 square feet or taller than 8 feet. And that's out of the transportation code. That's that verbiage there comes out of the transportation code. From the ground, including supporting poles on county-owned or controlled property that's being used for a polling place. E, no one may post a political sign in any location that obstructs vision of traffic entering, exiting, or driving in or on or around a county-owned controlled polling place location. No one may post a political sign on any permanent structure, including building, fences, or gates. G, any political sign in violation of these regulations may be removed by the county staff and placed in temporary storage. I'm sorry. If you fail to pick that up, we can dispose of it in 7 days. Number 3, designated area for electioneering. I think this is where really we come down to the heart of what has been brought to our attention. One of the attorneys that did send us an email, and I've talked to him personally, indicated, and it's just his numbers, so I'm not saying these are right numbers, but he felt like that about 1 out of 5 people that came in to vote complained about what was going on in the parking lot. So, and I know Laura had addressed that early on. We've had a lot of, I would say I had anybody come and just say, Judge, you got it, but definitely some complaining about how that was going on. And no one was in violation of any of our ordinances. We don't have any ordinances on it, but that's what this is about. But I would also like to say that it was happening by everybody and every party. It was not just one group doing it. It was everybody doing it. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I mean, the people that were campaigning for Alcott and the people that were campaigning for Glenn Rogers were both out in the driveway talking to people. So now I see y'all looking like, oh, it was different. It wasn't different from what our ordinance is going to be. How they approach people and what they say, I believe, was drastically different. Yes, I don't.
They couldn't even get out of the car.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there was a difference in the way the approach that each one took. But as far as just being out there doing it, we had it going on all over the place, you know. And I was asked, Judge, what are you going to do about this? And I said, well, where do you want me to start? You can't. We don't have any ordinances. There's no.
Well, and you can't even by ordinance control that.
Yeah, no, it's
You
a
have
done.
the right to do that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. So this is, we're just talking about trying to create reasonable regulations that address how that's gonna work for public safety, so.
And some people tell me they would never go back there and vote again.
Yeah, I've heard that too, so, you know, it was a little interesting, but anyway. Designated area for electioneering, which I think this is probably the main point of this. The rest of this is, we've addressed a lot of it in itself, but this third area is the designated area for electioneering. Designated area for electioneering means those areas shown on Exhibit B identified in the green as areas specifically designated for electioneering, which would otherwise be prohibited for electioneering under the county building and property use policy or other sections of this regulation. B, no one shall park or leave a motor vehicle or other vehicle or device customarily used for transportation or transporting with or without an occupant which displays a political sign during any voting period within a prohibited area or area other than the designated area for electioneering and for 30 minutes before or after the voting period ends. C, no one shall loiter or electioneer on sidewalks or driveways and interfere with citizens' access to polling locations unless the sidewalk or driveway is part of the specifically designated area for electioneering. This prohibition does not apply to passive electioneering of speech, such as wearing clothing, hats, or pins, which may be considered electioneering. D, no more than 6 signs per candidate may be placed or erected on county-owned or controlled property. There again, there's where our sign, we need to make sure that we're making that all the same. Political signs that are personally held by individuals at county-owned or controlled polling locations during a voting period will not count towards the maximum number of allowed political signs that may be placed or enacted under this provision, providing, however, such political signs may not exceed the height and size maximum set out herein, and they must not obstruct the view of traffic or be within the designated area of electioneering. So that, we're talking about a distinction here between 6 signs that you can place in the ground if we do that, but that doesn't limit the amount of signs that actually could be out there for a proposition, a proposal, or a candidate if they were being carried. So if someone wants to carry those signs, that's perfectly fine. You could have 20 of them if you want to. We're not limiting people's ability to carry signs. It's just the affixing them to the property under these electioneering rules. E, no one shall leave or place a political sign on county-owned or controlled property, including within the designated area for electioneering outside the voting period and for 30 minutes before or after. EF, no one shall post or place political signs in public easements or right-of-ways. G, no one shall block the entrance or exit to any county-owned or controlled property that is being used as a polling place at any time, nor shall anyone obstruct a highway, street, sidewalk, elevator, aisle, hallway, entrance, or exit to which the public or a substantial group of the public has access, or any other place used for the passage of persons, vehicles, or conveyance, regardless of the means of creating the obstruction and whether the obstruction arises from his or her act alone or from his or her act and the acts of other as defined by Texas Penal Code 4203. Sheriff, can you, that is, that verbiage comes.
42.03?
Yes, sir.
That's obstructing highway or passageway.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty, it sounds like that's pretty close to the penal code.
Yeah, I think that verbiage, that's where that obviously that's where that came from, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't dream up highway, street, sidewalk, elevator, aisle, hallway, entrance, or exit. That's actually in the penal
No,
code. That's the
passageway.
verbiage right out of there, so. And then number 4, as set forth in section 61.003C of the Texas Election Code, a violation of the provision of these regulations is a Class C misdemeanor. And number 5, the regulations will be in full force and effect from the date after, of course, Commissioner's approval. Commissioners, do y'all have any comments on that at this point that we, other than the, I mean, I think we need to decide how our, moving forward. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the definition of vehicle.
Definition of vehicle?
Yep.
Okay, that's a good one. What, I don't know.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. I
We
think
need to
it-
make sure,
I-
because if we're trying to address the 30-foot trailer that took up 10 parking spots.
Yeah, so
But then I haven't looked at it,
yes, ma'am.
but
Let me,
I'm just saying we need to make sure we look at what the definition of vehicle is.
let me look here just a second. Did anybody see where the trailer?
Oversized vehicles?
I don't think, the problem is vehicle, the word vehicle, because I think that
Or oversized.
that usually implies a motor propelled.
So, Counselor, here's what it says in it. You don't have a copy of this, do you? So you can't, yeah, boy, that would've been handy, huh?
That's fine.
Oh.
No, but if it had it in there.
Yeah, so number 3, designated area for electioneering, B, it says no one shall park and leave a motor vehicle or other vehicle or device customarily used for transportation or transporting. That's,
Oversized tractor, oversized trailer.
I don't know. That's a good question, Counselor. We can address that.
So we need to look and make sure if there's any case law on it or.
Yeah, right.
anything. So we can make sure if you're trying to cover that situation, that you're covering it appropriately.
Correct. Thank you, Counselor.
Is this, can the public ask a question here?
You can, since the Commissioner recognized it. Yes.
I'm the public for the moment. Does anything in this sign, proposal address something like content of sign, like profanity? And should it?
I don't know, you get into telling people what they can or can't say, you end up with the freedom of speech issues, we don't know where that's gonna go. Now, there are laws on the book that, under harassment, that actually, that do address, vulgar language, but then, doggone it, that's, what's vulgar these days is not what was vulgar when I was a kid, I can assure you that. Yeah, that's.
The can of worms just got much deeper.
All right, and so,
You know, that group will put that.
So my question is now, if this parking lot, I know nothing after 100 foot we can do anything about, but can we not reserve parking areas for
Voting
elections and handicap?
I don't think that means, yes, we can do that, I think we can do that at our own
At our
discretion
own
anytime we want to.
discretion. Okay.
Absolutely. I don't know if that needs to be addressed in the electioneering part of it, but we can do that anytime we want. All right, if I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, just wanted to address what the practical aspect of what we're talking about here. If we're gonna prohibit in the driveways, sidewalks, and all of that. So I know it's hard to see the picture here, but this is a picture of the, annex in Mineral Wells with the main parking lot to the west side of it here. And so what we're talking about is, for electioneering, looks like the designated area would be the 100-foot marker, but it could not be in the driveways. It can't be where, you can't be out in the driveways, the parking areas that where cars are driving, and it would be limited to the green space, which is grassy area, so from the 100-foot mark in the grass going out to the west part of the parking lot. Does that make sense? Some of y'all are shaking your head yes, like you understand that. If you're over there, you understand what that would look like. So that would be the designated area for electioneering. We can't prohibit it. They can be right up to the 100-foot mark. We can't prohibit that, like move that out further, but we can regulate it after the 100-foot mark. So the regulations would be no electioneering in the driveways or on the sidewalks, as it was listed in here, which leaves the grass area of the parking lot. That would include all the grass area, yeah, coming out. That's my interpretation of what that would look like. So, all right, commissioners, y'all have any questions about that?
Well, the thing is, how you gonna regulate the parking?
Well, the parking we won't regulate the parking other than, we had discussed with.
The electioneers are gonna be parking in the parking lot.
So, correct, Commissioner. So what we had talked about was, which I don't think needs to be necessarily a part of this,
Okay.
it could be on, as far as some signage for voting only.
Okay.
We could have some signs like that. But what Alora had come, and presented to us, before Election Day was some temporary handicap parking. So what I had, thought was we would do some additional handicap parking during those days, because we have a lot of our older folks coming to vote, and they're having to walk from way in the west part of the parking lot all the way in. So right there in that center aisle, Commissioner, to do maybe 4 additional handicap parkings on each side. So you'd have 8 slots for handicap parking.
Okay.
And then after that, we had talked about temporary signage, which is totally authorized under our temporary signage order. We can do whatever we need to do to put some voter spot. All right, if I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, just wanted to address what the practical aspect of what we're talking about here. If we're gonna prohibit in the driveways, sidewalks, and all of that. So I know it's hard to see the picture here, but this is a picture of the annex in Mineral Wells with the main parking lot to the west side of it here. And so what we're talking about is, for electioneering, looks like the designated area would be the 100-foot marker, but it could not be in the driveways. It can't be where, you can't be out in the driveways, the parking areas that where cars are driving, and it would be limited to the green space, which is grassy area, so from the 100-foot mark in the grass going out to the west part of the parking lot. Does that make sense? Some of y'all are shaking your head yes, like you understand that. If you're over there, you understand what that would look like. So that would be the designated area for electioneering. We can't prohibit it. They can be right up to the 100-foot mark. We can't prohibit that, like move that out further, but we can regulate it after the 100-foot mark. So the regulations would be no electioneering in the driveways or on the sidewalks as it was listed in here, which leaves the grass area of the parking lot. That would include all the grass area, yeah, coming out.